Staff Sergeant Maria Santos had always been different from the other Marines at Camp Pendleton. While her fellow soldiers spent their free time at the local bars or playing video games in the barracks, Maria could be found in the base library, studying military history and strategy. She had joined the Marines 5 years ago, not because she needed direction in life, but because she wanted to serve something greater than herself. Maria came from a family of teachers in East Los Angeles. Her father taught high school mathematics, and her mother was an elementary school principal. They had raised her to value education, hard work, and integrity. When Maria announced her decision to enlist, her parents were surprised but supportive. They knew their daughter had always been drawn to challenges that others might avoid. At 5 feet 4 inches tall, Maria was not physically imposing, but she possessed an inner strength that commanded respect. Her dark hair was always perfectly regulation, and her uniform was consistently immaculate. She had earned her sergeant's stripes through dedication and competence, not through connections or politics. Her fellow Marines respected her knowledge and her unwavering commitment to doing things the right way. The trouble began when Staff Sergeant Rodriguez was transferred to another base. Rodriguez had been the senior non-commissioned officer in Maria's unit, and his departure created a power vacuum that several people wanted to fill. Among them was Sergeant First Class Tommy Mitchell, a loud, brash man who believed that military leadership was about intimidation and volume, rather than competence and respect. Mitchell had been passed over for promotion twice, and he blamed his failures on what he called political correctness in the military. He particularly resented the fact that women and minorities were advancing in ranks, while he remained stuck. When Rodriguez left, Mitchell expected to be promoted to fill the position. Instead, the commanding officer chose Maria. The announcement came during a Monday morning formation. Captain Williams, the unit commander, called the company to attention and announced Maria's promotion to the position of senior NCO. The majority of the Marines responded with appropriate military bearing, but Maria noticed the dark looks from Mitchell and his small group of supporters. After the formation, Mitchell approached Maria with a fake smile. "Congratulations, Santos," he said, his tone suggesting anything but congratulations. "I'm sure you'll do just fine in your new position." Maria knew better than to take the bait. "Thank you, Mitchell. I'm looking forward to working with everyone to maintain the high standards of this unit." Over the next few weeks, Mitchell began a subtle campaign of undermining Maria's authority. He would make snide comments about diversity hires when he thought Maria couldn't hear. He would arrive late to meetings she called, and then claim he had been handling real military business. He spread rumors that Maria had only been promoted because the military needed to meet quotas for female leadership. The situation came to a head during a training exercise. Maria had developed a new protocol for equipment checks that would increase efficiency and reduce the chance of errors. When she presented the protocol to the unit, Mitchell openly questioned her authority. "With respect, Sergeant Santos," he said, emphasizing her rank in a way that suggested disrespect. "I've been doing equipment checks since before you enlisted. I think I know what works and what doesn't." Maria remained calm and professional. "I appreciate your experience, Mitchell. However, this new protocol incorporates lessons learned from recent operations and feedback from other units. I'm confident it will improve our readiness." Mitchell's face reddened. "Just because you read about it in a book doesn't mean it works in the real world." The comment hung in the air. Maria could feel the eyes of every Marine in the room on her. This was a test of her leadership, and everyone knew it. She could respond with anger and potentially escalate the situation. Or she could demonstrate the kind of leadership she believed in. "Mitchell," she said quietly but firmly, "I need to speak with you privately after this meeting." When the meeting ended, Maria called Mitchell into a separate room. "Your behavior during that meeting was inappropriate," she said. "You undermined my authority in front of the entire unit, and that's not acceptable." Mitchell crossed his arms. "I was just expressing my professional opinion." "No," Maria replied. "You were being insubordinate. I'm giving you one warning. If this behavior continues, I'll have no choice but to write you up for disciplinary action." Mitchell's eyes narrowed. "Is that a threat, Sergeant?" "It's a promise," Maria said. "I won't allow anyone to undermine the discipline and order of this unit." regardless of their personal feelings about me. The confrontation might have ended there, but Mitchell was not the type to back down. Instead of improving his behavior, he decided to escalate his campaign against Maria. He began keeping detailed notes of every decision she made, looking for anything he could use against her. He also started reaching out to contacts in other units, trying to gather ammunition to use in complaints against her leadership. Mitchell's opportunity came 3 weeks later. During a routine inspection, Maria discovered that some equipment maintenance had not been properly documented. The equipment was functional and safe, but the paperwork was incomplete. Following proper protocol, Maria reported the discrepancy to Captain Williams and implemented corrective measures. Mitchell saw this as his chance. He filed a formal complaint, alleging that Maria was being unnecessarily harsh and creating a hostile work environment. He claimed that the previous leadership would have handled the situation more appropriately, and that Maria was being heavy-handed because she felt she had something to prove as a woman in a leadership position. Captain Williams was in a difficult position. While he believed in Maria's leadership abilities, he also had to take formal complaints seriously. The complaint created a bureaucratic process that required investigation and documentation. During this process, Williams felt he needed to temporarily reassign Maria to avoid any appearance of impropriety. The reassignment came on a Friday afternoon. Captain Williams called Maria into his office and explained the situation. "I want to be clear," he said. "This is not disciplinary action. This is a temporary measure while we investigate Mitchell's complaint. I have full confidence in your leadership abilities." To me 1:45. Maria understood the political realities of military bureaucracy. "Where will I be assigned, sir?" Williams looked uncomfortable. "Base security. Gate duty." Gate duty was considered one of the most mundane assignments on the base. It involved checking identification cards, inspecting vehicles, and maintaining the security checkpoint at the main entrance. Most Marines viewed it as punishment duty, reserved for those who had made mistakes or were being disciplined. Maria felt the sting of the assignment, but she maintained her professional composure. "I understand, sir. When do I report?" "Monday morning." "Again, Santos, this is temporary. The investigation should be completed within a few weeks." That weekend, Maria's phone rang constantly with calls from other Marines who had heard about her reassignment. Some offered support and encouragement, while others seemed to be calling out of curiosity or to gossip about the situation. Maria politely declined most invitations to discuss the matter and spent the weekend preparing mentally for her new assignment. On Monday morning, Maria reported to the main gate at 0600 hours. The security checkpoint was a small building with bulletproof windows and electronic equipment for scanning identification cards and vehicle passes. The gate itself was a heavy steel barrier that could be raised and lowered to control access to the base. Sergeant Johnson, who was ending his shift, briefed Maria on the procedures. "It's pretty straightforward," he said. "Check every ID. Verify it against the database. Inspect vehicles according to the current threat level protocols. Most of the time, it's routine, but you never know when something unusual might happen." As Johnson drove away, Maria found herself alone at the gate for the first time. She looked around at her new workplace and made a decision. If she was going to be assigned to gate duty, she was going to execute those duties with the same excellence she brought to everything else in her military career. The first few hours of her first day were indeed routine. Marines and civilian employees arrived for work, showing their identification cards and passing through the checkpoint without incident. Maria processed each person efficiently and professionally, but she also began to observe patterns and details that others might miss. She noticed that some vehicles had been modified in ways that weren't immediately obvious. She observed the behavior of drivers and passengers, looking for signs of nervousness or unusual activity. She studied the identification documents carefully, not just scanning them through the electronic reader but actually looking at them to ensure they appeared authentic. Around noon, a civilian contractor arrived with a truck full of supplies for the base commissary. The driver seemed nervous and kept checking his mirrors. When Maria asked to inspect the cargo area, the driver became defensive and claimed he was running late. Maria remained calm and professional. Sir, I understand you're concerned about time, but I need to complete the inspection according to protocol. It will only take a few minutes. The inspection revealed nothing unusual, but Maria's thorough approach made an impression on the driver. As he was leaving, he approached her window. I've been delivering to this base for 3 years, he said, and you're the first gate guard who actually seemed to care about doing the job right. Most of them just waved me through. The comment gave Maria a new perspective on her assignment. While others might view gate duty as mundane or punitive, Maria began to see it as an essential security function that deserved the same attention to detail as any other military responsibility. 3 days into her gate duty assignment, Maria had already established a reputation for thoroughness that was beginning to spread throughout the base. Word traveled fast in the military community, and Marines began to notice that the new gate guard was different from her predecessors. Maria arrived each morning 30 minutes before her shift began, using the time to review the overnight security reports and check all equipment. She cleaned the windows of the security booth until they sparkled and organized the paperwork so that everything could be accessed quickly during busy periods. Her attention to detail was remarkable, and it showed in every aspect of her performance. On Thursday morning, a staff car approached the gate carrying Colonel Harrison, the base executive officer. Most gate guards would simply glance at the colonel's identification and wave him through immediately. Maria, however, followed proper protocol exactly as written. She respectfully requested the colonel's identification, scanned it through the system, and asked about the purpose of his visit. Colonel Harrison was initially surprised by the thoroughness of the check, but then impressed. Sergeant Santos, he said, reading her name tag. How long have you been on gate duty? 4 days, sir, Maria replied professionally. 4 days, and you're already setting a new standard. Carry on, Sergeant. As the colonel's car drove away, Maria felt a sense of pride in her work. She was determined to prove that no assignment was beneath a professional Marine, and that excellence was a choice that could be made regardless of circumstances. The real test came the following week when the base hosted a joint training exercise involving units from different branches of the military. This meant increased traffic, unfamiliar faces, and higher security requirements. Many of the visiting personnel were unfamiliar with the base's procedures, and some expected to be waved through based on their rank or their association with the exercise. A Navy lieutenant commander approached the gate in a rental car, talking loudly on his cell phone and gesturing for Maria to hurry up with the inspection. When Maria asked him to end his phone call and provide proper identification, the officer became irritated. Look, Sergeant, he said with condescension. I'm here for the joint exercise. I'm already running late for a briefing with your commanding general. Can we skip the formalities? Maria remained calm and respectful. Sir, I understand you're pressed for time, but I need to follow proper security protocols for all personnel entering the base. May I see your identification and orders, please? The lieutenant commander huffed in frustration but eventually complied with the request. When Maria discovered that his temporary base access had expired the previous day, she politely informed him that he would need to visit the visitor control center to obtain updated credentials. This is ridiculous, the officer complained. I'm a lieutenant commander in the United States Navy. Sir, I respect your rank and your service, Maria replied professionally. But security protocols apply to all personnel, regardless of branch or rank. The Visitor Control Center is located in Building 1205, and they can process your updated credentials in approximately 15 minutes. Other vehicles had lined up behind the lieutenant commander's car, and Maria could see drivers checking their watches and looking impatient. The pressure was building, but she refused to compromise security procedures for the sake of convenience. The lieutenant commander eventually drove to the visitor control center and returned with proper credentials. As he passed through the gate, he stopped and approached Maria's window. Sergeant, he said, his tone now respectful. I want to apologize for my behavior earlier. You were absolutely right to follow procedure. And I should have known better. Maria nodded acknowledgement. Thank you, sir. Have a good day. The incident with the Navy officer became the talk of the base within hours. Marines who had heard about it expressed both admiration and amazement at Maria's professionalism under pressure. Even some of the Marines who had initially supported Mitchell began to reconsider their position. During the second week of the joint exercise, Maria faced her biggest challenge yet. A convoy of 3 vehicles approached the gate, carrying a group of special operations personnel. The lead vehicle contained a Marine Force reconnaissance team, followed by a Navy SEAL unit, and finally an Army Special Forces group. The convoy leader, a Marine captain, approached Maria's window with an air of impatience. "Sergeant, we're running a classified operation. We need immediate access to the base without the standard inspection procedures." Maria had encountered similar situations before, but never with such high-level personnel. She knew that special operations units often worked under different rules than regular military units, but she also knew that base security protocols existed for important reasons. "Sir," Maria replied respectfully, "I understand the sensitive nature of your mission, but I need to verify your authorization for expedited entry. Do you have documentation from base security or the commanding officer?" The captain's face showed his frustration. "Sergeant, I don't have time for this bureaucracy. People's lives depend on our mission timeline." Maria felt the weight of the moment. She could see the other vehicles in the convoy, filled with elite warriors who were accustomed to operating outside normal military procedures. She could also see a line of regular base personnel forming behind the convoy, waiting to enter the base for their normal duties. Taking a deep breath, Maria made her decision. "Sir, I respect the importance of your mission, but I cannot authorize entry without proper documentation. However, I can contact the base commander's office immediately to expedite the authorization process." The captain looked like he wanted to argue further, but then something in Maria's steady gaze seemed to make him reconsider. "Fine," he said. "Make the call." Maria quickly contacted the base operations center and explained the situation. Within 3 minutes, she received verbal authorization from the duty officer to allow the convoy to enter with a standard identification check, but without vehicle inspection. As the convoy prepared to drive through the gate, the captain approached Maria one final time. "Sergeant," he said quietly, "you handled that exactly right. A lot of people would have either waved us through without question or gotten into a power struggle. You found the right balance between security and mission requirements." The convoy drove away, and Maria returned to her normal duties. But something about the interaction stayed with her. She had faced pressure from some of the most elite warriors in the military, and had maintained her professional standards while still finding a way to support their mission. Later that afternoon, Sergeant Mitchell drove up to the gate. He had been visiting another unit on the base, and was returning to his duties. When he saw Maria in the gate booth, his expression darkened. "Well, well," Mitchell said with mock surprise. "If it isn't our fearless leader," reduced to checking identification cards. Maria processed his credentials efficiently and professionally. "Have a good day, Mitchell." But Mitchell wasn't finished. "You know, Santos, this is where people like you end up. All that book learning and political correctness doesn't mean much when it comes to real military work." Maria looked directly at Mitchell. "I'm proud of the work I'm doing here, Mitchell. Every position in the military serves an important purpose, and I intend to execute my duties with the same excellence I've always brought to my assignments." Mitchell's mocking smile faded slightly. He had expected Maria to be defeated or demoralized by her assignment to gate duty. Instead, she seemed more confident and professional than ever. As Mitchell drove away, Maria reflected on her 2 weeks at the gate. She had learned something important about herself and about leadership. True professionals didn't let circumstances define their performance. They brought excellence to whatever assignment they received, and they found ways to make a positive impact regardless of the situation. The joint exercise continued for another week, and Maria's reputation continued to grow. Officers from visiting units began to comment on the professionalism of the base's gate security. Several visiting commanders made specific mention of Sergeant Santos in their after-action reports. Maria also began to notice changes in the attitudes of Marines from her own unit. Many of them made a point of speaking respectfully to her when they passed through the gate. Some stopped to chat briefly and express their support for her during this difficult period. Even Captain Williams made an unscheduled visit to the gate on Friday afternoon. "Sergeant Santos," he said, approaching her window. "I wanted to personally check on how things are going." "Very well, sir," Maria replied. I'm learning a lot about base security operations, and I believe I'm contributing to the mission." Williams nodded approvingly. "I've been hearing excellent reports about your performance. The investigation into Mitchell's complaint should be completed next week, and I expect you'll be returning to your regular duties soon." As the captain drove away, Maria felt a sense of satisfaction. She had turned what many would consider a setback into an opportunity to demonstrate her professionalism and dedication. She had proven to herself and to others that a true leader could excel in any assignment. The weekend approached, and Maria prepared for 2 more days of gate duty before the joint exercise concluded. She had no idea that the following Monday would bring an encounter that would change her military career forever. Monday morning arrived with unusual activity on the base. The joint exercise was entering its final phase, and Maria could see increased helicopter traffic in the distance. Several high-ranking officers had already passed through her gate, all heading toward the Special Operations compound on the far side of the base. Maria had been on gate duty for exactly 3 weeks. The investigation into Mitchell's complaint was scheduled to conclude that afternoon, and Captain Williams had already hinted that she would likely be returning to her regular duties by the end of the week. Despite the temporary nature of her assignment, Maria approached this Monday with the same attention to detail she had shown every day. Around 0800 hours, a black SUV with tinted windows approached the gate. The vehicle had government plates, but no other identifying marks. As it pulled up to the checkpoint, Maria could see that it contained several occupants, but the tinted windows made it difficult to determine their identities or ranks. The front passenger window lowered, revealing a man in his early 40s wearing navy fatigues without any visible rank insignia. His hair was graying at the temples, and he had the weathered look of someone who had spent years in challenging environments. Most notably, he wore the distinctive Budweiser pin that identified him as a Navy SEAL. "Good morning, Sergeant," the man said politely. "We're here for the final briefing of the joint exercise." "Good morning, Sergeant." 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 Maria noticed immediately that the man's demeanor was different from most of the personnel she had encountered during the exercise. There was no impatience in his voice, no attempt to hurry her along or bypass procedures. He seemed genuinely respectful and professional. "Good morning, sir," Maria replied. "May I see identification for all personnel in the vehicle, please?" Without hesitation, the SEAL handed over several identification cards. As Maria began processing them through her system, she noticed something that made her pause. The first card belonged to Commander Michael Thompson, and according to the database, he was the commanding officer of SEAL Team 5, one of the most elite special operations units in the military. Maria had read about Commander Thompson during her military studies. He was a legend in the special operations community, with multiple combat deployments and numerous commendations for valor. He was known not only for his tactical expertise but also for his leadership philosophy, which emphasized respect for all military personnel regardless of their rank or assignment. As Maria continued processing the identification cards, she could hear quiet conversation inside the SUV. She couldn't make out the words, but the tone suggested that the passengers were discussing something serious. When she handed the cards back to Commander Thompson, he made eye contact with her in a way that seemed to convey genuine interest. "Sergeant Santos," he said, reading her name tag carefully. "I've been hearing interesting things about the gate security during this exercise. Multiple commanders have commented on the professionalism and thoroughness of the checkpoint procedures." Maria felt a slight flush of pride, but maintained her professional composure. "Thank you, sir. I believe that every security procedure serves an important purpose, regardless of how routine it might seem." Commander Thompson nodded thoughtfully. "That's exactly the right attitude. In special operations, we often say that attention to detail in small things translates to excellence in big things. It sounds like you understand that principle." The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of another vehicle behind the SUV. Maria could see that several more cars were forming a line, and she knew she needed to keep traffic moving efficiently. "Sir," she said respectfully, "I need to process the other vehicles. Thank you for your patience with the security procedures." Commander Thompson smiled slightly. No thanks necessary. Sergeant, you're doing exactly what you should be doing. As the SUV drove through the gate, Maria returned to her duties. She processed the remaining vehicles quickly and professionally. But her mind kept returning to the conversation with Commander Thompson. There had been something in his manner that suggested he was evaluating more than just her checkpoint procedures. 2 hours later, Maria was surprised to see the same black SUV returning to the gate. This time, Commander Thompson was driving alone. He approached the checkpoint and lowered his window, but instead of presenting identification, he spoke directly to Maria. "Sergeant Santos," he said, "do you have a few minutes to talk?" Maria checked her watch and saw that the next shift change wasn't for several hours. The traffic flow had slowed considerably, and she could spare a few minutes for conversation. "Yes, sir," she replied. Commander Thompson parked the SUV and walked over to Maria's booth. Up close, she could see the wear lines around his eyes and the quiet confidence that marked him as someone who had led people through dangerous situations. "I want to tell you something," Thompson began. "I've been in the military for 22 years. I've served with Marines, soldiers, sailors, and airmen all over the world. In all that time, I've learned that you can tell a lot about a person's character by how they perform in assignments that others might consider beneath them." Maria listened carefully, unsure where the conversation was heading. Thompson continued, "Over the past 3 weeks, I've been watching how different personnel interact with base security. I've seen officers try to intimidate their way past checkpoints. I've seen NCOs get angry when asked to follow standard procedures. I've seen people treat gate guards like they're invisible or unimportant." He paused and looked directly at Maria. "And then I've watched you. I've seen how you treat every person who comes through this gate with the same respect and professionalism, regardless of their rank. I've seen how you follow procedures exactly as written, even when it would be easier to cut corners. Most importantly, I've seen how you've maintained your standards even when you know that some people view this assignment as punishment." Maria felt her throat tighten slightly. She hadn't realized that anyone in the special operations community had been paying such close attention to her performance. "Sir," she said quietly, "I believe that every job in the military is important. If I'm assigned to gate duty, then I'm going to be the best gate guard I can be." Thompson smiled. And for the first time, Maria saw genuine warmth in his expression. "That's exactly what I hoped you would say. Sergeant Santos, I want you to know something. The way you've conducted yourself over these past 3 weeks demonstrates the kind of leadership and character that we look for in special operations, not the physical requirements or the technical skills, but the mental attitude and the moral foundation." Maria was stunned. She had never considered that her assignment to gate duty might be viewed as anything more than a temporary setback in her career. Thompson wasn't finished. "I've spoken with Captain Williams about your situation. I understand that you were temporarily reassigned due to some administrative issues in your unit. I want you to know that those issues reflect badly on the people who created them, not on you." At that moment, Maria heard the sound of vehicles approaching the gate. She looked up to see a convoy of 3 cars, led by Captain Williams himself. Behind him were several other officers from the base command staff, including the commanding general. As the convoy pulled up to the checkpoint, Captain Williams got out of his car and approached Maria's booth. His expression was serious, but Maria could see something else in his eyes that looked like satisfaction. "Sergeant Santos," Captain Williams said formally, "the investigation into the complaint against your leadership has been completed. The investigation found the complaint to be without merit and motivated by personal animosity rather than legitimate concerns about your performance." Maria felt a wave of relief wash over her, but she maintained her military bearing. "Thank you, sir," Captain Williams continued. "Effective immediately, you are restored to your position as senior NCO of your unit. Additionally, I want to inform you that multiple officers have submitted commendations regarding your performance during this temporary assignment." Commander Thompson stepped forward. "Captain Williams, if I may?" Williams nodded. "Of course, Commander." Thompson turned to face Maria directly. "Sergeant Santos, in my 22 years of military service, I have rarely encountered someone who demonstrated such consistent professionalism and dedication to duty under difficult circumstances. Your performance over these past 3 weeks has been exemplary. Then, something extraordinary happened. Commander Thompson came to attention and rendered a slow, deliberate salute to Maria. The gesture was not required by military protocol, since Maria was enlisted personnel and Thompson was an officer. But the salute was unmistakably a mark of respect from one professional warrior to another. Maria returned the salute crisply, feeling the weight of the moment. Around them, she could see other Marines and officers stopping to observe the interaction. "Sergeant Santos," Thompson said as he lowered his salute, "true leaders are revealed not by the positions they hold, but by how they conduct themselves when they think no one is watching. You have demonstrated the highest standards of military bearing, and it has been an honor to observe your performance." As Commander Thompson returned to his vehicle, Captain Williams approached Maria. "Santos," he said quietly, "I want you to know that Commander Thompson specifically requested this opportunity to commend your performance. He said that in all his years of military service, he had never seen someone turn a temporary setback into such a powerful demonstration of leadership." Later that afternoon, as Maria prepared to leave the gate for the final time, she reflected on the past 3 weeks. What had started as a humiliating reassignment had become one of the most valuable learning experiences of her military career. She had discovered that leadership wasn't about the position you held or the respect that others were required to show you. True leadership was about the standards you set for yourself and the consistency with which you maintained those standards, regardless of circumstances. Word of Commander Thompson's salute spread throughout the base within hours. Marines who had heard about it spoke of it with a mixture of amazement and respect. Even Sergeant Mitchell, when he eventually learned what had happened, found himself questioning his own assumptions about leadership and character. Maria returned to her regular duties the following week, but she carried with her the lessons learned during her time at the gate. She had proven to herself and to others that excellence was a choice that could be made in any assignment, no matter how mundane it might seem to others. Years later, Maria would look back on those 3 weeks of gate duty as a turning point in her military career, not because of the recognition she received, but because of what she learned about herself and about the true nature of leadership. The salute from Commander Thompson was gratifying, but the real victory was in knowing that she had maintained her standards when it would have been easier to do otherwise. The story of Maria Santos and her 3 weeks on gate duty became part of the unofficial folklore of Camp Pendleton. New Marines would hear about it during their orientation, and officers would reference it in leadership classes. But for Maria herself, the most important outcome was the quiet satisfaction of knowing that she had faced adversity with dignity and had emerged stronger for the experience.